Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll finish up the top for the Seattle end table. If you haven't seen part 1, go ahead and check out that video here. The top of this table starts by milling up some 8/4 walnut. This table will have a glass top supported by an outer ring and an inner hub. The 45-degree cuts on this piece of wood here will make up the hub. I used some setup blocks and a stop block on a crosscut sled, which allowed me to get 6 identical sections from this piece of stock. Using my table saw fence as a reference to keep everything square, I used some blue tape to hold 3 sections together and form 2 halves of the center hub. It's very difficult to get 6 miters to line up perfectly since the error compounds with every cut. So using some Titebond 2 Dark, I glued up 2 sections independently. I've been told this is an old wood turner's trick, but it's how I essentially jointed these 2 sections. By placing them on the crosscut sled and running them through the table saw at the same time, I got a perfectly matched curve. Off camera, I glued up the 2 halves and moved over to the drum sander. Here, the top and bottom faces were flattened. I attached a circle template with some double-sided tape, secured the hub blank to my bench with some more double-sided tape, and used a compression pattern bit in the router to start forming the circle. On the router table, I used a large compression flush trim bit to remove the material on the outside and form the circle. Back on the inside, I repeated the process to finish forming the hub. One of the most difficult aspects of this top was getting all 24 fins evenly spaced. This took a lot of time to think through how to make a jig for this. I settled on using another laser cut template. The jig allowed me to index the hub and cut grooves for the fins on the bandsaw. Using a stop block and the bandsaw fence, I could cut a groove, advance the jig, and have a perfectly spaced groove. Once the edges were defined, I removed the rest of the waste with an 1/8-inch chisel. With the center hub complete, I turned my attention to making the outer ring of the top. Using some 4/4 walnut, I cut 8 pieces, basically repeating the process for making the hub. I laid out all 8 pieces and selected the best grain pattern. I laid the glass top in place to get an idea for the fit. Because the joints are end grain, they needed some reinforcing. But because there will be an internal rabbet and an external chamfer, it was important to precisely locate the dowel pins. I carefully laid out the marks with a setup block. With all the layout marks made, I used a dowel jig and a drill to bore the holes. A piece of blue tape wrapped around the drill bit acts as a depth stop. After gluing up 2 halves, I used the same trick I used on the hub to get the perfect joints, except this time I used a track saw. With a little bit more Titebond Dark and some dowel pins, the tabletop ring was ready for glue up. To get the ring completely flat and down to final thickness, I went back to the drum sander. With the ring flattened, I burned a few more templates on the laser cutter. These templates allowed me to flush trim the ring out of the blank, and also index the router to cut mortises to accept the fins that will connect it to the hub. Of course, it was affixed to the ring with some double stick tape. To rough out the ring, I used a router with a brass bushing. To cut the mortises, I used the plunge base on the router, a 3/16 spiral upcut bit, and a brass bushing that indexed into the slots in the template. You may see the defect in the ring where the router got away from me for a minute. I was too frustrated to film it, but was able to fix it off camera. I removed some material and the mistake with a hand plane, glued on some stock, and trimmed it flush with the router. A little more flush trimming on the router table, and the ring was almost complete. In order to square off the mortises, I marked out layout lines with a set of digital calipers. Then, using some chisels, squared up the corners. With the project in the home stretch, I treated myself to a new router, and wow, what a nice router this Festool OF1400 is. I put it to work immediately, cutting the rabbet to accept the glass top. I took a very shallow first cut to avoid any chip out, and then worked the rabbet down to final depth. The last part of the project was to create the fins that support the top and connect it to the hub. I roughed these out on the bandsaw from some 8/4 maple. On the oscillating sander, I cleaned up the edges. Using the bandsaw and a feather board, I cut the blanks into thin fins, leaving them slightly oversized. As if I hadn't used enough double stick tape on this project, I stuck all 24 fins to some scraps of 3/4 melamine and ran them through the drum sander. I used a block plane to clean them up and perfectly dial in the fit to the hub and ring. I pre-finished the hub with some Rubio Monocoat Pure, masked it off to control any glue squeeze out, and then glued each fin into its slot in the hub. A few of the fins needed just a little bit more refinement to fit perfectly into the hub, so I used a rabbet plane to do that. With the fins glued to the hub, I used some 2x4s as cawls, added some glue to the mortises, and gently clamped the assembly to the ring. Using a trim router, I put a light chamfer on the top to break the edge. Back at the base, I used a little more Titebond Dark to attach the top. With the assembly complete, I used some more Rubio Monocoat Pure as finish, applying it with a white Scotch-Brite pad. This was by far the most difficult piece that I've ever attempted, and I think it really came out great. I'm very happy with the design, and hopefully you think so too. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.